He's loudmouthed, gratuitously offensive, and has often been accused of misogyny. But enough about Piers Morgan. Because this week he played the role of Mini-Me to Andrew Tate's Dr. Evil. Now, if you don't know who Andrew Tate is, he rose to fame early this year after being booted off of Instagram and Facebook. He had 4.7 million followers on the former. In August, he was the most searched person on Google, higher than Donald Trump, Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, or Kim Kardashian. On TikTok, videos featuring his name as a hashtag have been viewed 13 billion times. That's right, 13 billion. That led him to tweet this earlier this month. Genghis Khan had endless women and 200 children as reward for conquest. I am the most searched man on the planet. I have conquered Earth. I'm the highest status male on the planet. Females do not expect loyalty from me. They only expect that of lesser men. Tate spoke to Morgan last night, where he gave his views on contemporary Britain.
When I was in Qatar, I thought the World Cup was fantastically well run, incredibly good experience. But a lot of Qataris were saying to me, you know, there's this weird, quaint feeling back in your country that we all want to aspire to behave like that we all want to live in a country with massive drug problems, with massive knife crime issues, with scenes like the European Championships final where it's complete lawlessness going on, where stuff like the NHS, the system of healthcare, is basically collapsing, where the education system is dropping behind, so on and so on and so on. And it's a really interesting perspective. They were like, I know you all think that we want to have your form of democracy and your form of life, but actually we're fine, thanks.
Absolutely, because it's a failed society and it's godless. I think it's disgusting. We leave our old people to rot in old people's homes, and then we sit there and say we don't have enough money for nurses. I understand this nurse strike very well and how frustrating it can be if you walk into a hospital and the nurse is not prepared to work. But the nurses would be prepared to work at the current wage if they believed this country was spending its money prudently. When you see this country spending its money and just absolutely wasting it, pulling it out of thin air to fund proxy wars, God knows where, that has nothing to do with them. Of course, as a nurse, you're going to stand up and say, well, can't I get a pay rise? This country has failed on every metric. And especially our major cities. I've just come to London now. I made it very clear to my private jet pilot. I said, fuel the jet and leave it running, because the second I'm finished talking to Piers, I'm leaving this cesspit. It's disgusting. This country and London as a whole 10 years ago was one of the most hospitable cities on earth. Now you cannot walk around safely with a watch on. And you're a full-grown man. You're a full-grown adult. When's the last time there's been a serious problem in your life that you completely ignored and it fixed itself? Never, ever. What are any of our politicians doing to fix any of the problems we're genuinely...
Now, I found this such a curious clip, Nihal. I'll tell you why. Because Andrew Tate, perhaps for reasons we'll get into, is a bit of a ridiculous character, and he's wrong about a great many things, as is Piers Morgan. And yet they were talking about a situation which I think is a disintegration of public services, stagnation of living standards and whatnot, and feeding into a conversation about broader national decline, which actually a lot of legacy media doesn't want to talk about, a lot of politicians don't want to acknowledge, but I think is where the country is at. And my concern is you have figures like Andrew Tate making sense, whereas a lot of the legacy media does not. I want to hear your thoughts on that, Nihal. Maybe I'm alone in overestimating this man.
So basically, I think like my opinion on Andrew Tate is that he should be deplatformed. No free speech for people like this. But what you said is right, actually. People like Andrew Tate get the followings that they do because they actually acknowledge that there's the problem in society, whereas, you know, legacy media, like you said, or other more establishment figures don't. So when he says, oh, there is a problem, and then he diagnoses it correctly, but then offers prescriptions that are so horrible, people trust his prescriptions because his diagnosis is correct, you know? The same goes for Trump, the same goes for, you know, anyone else of these like outlandish figures who rely on populism.
You said he shouldn't be platformed. I mean, that's what happened. The reason why he trended on Google was because, of course, he lost his Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. He's back on Twitter, I should say. I suppose in his advantage, he had this kind of mini-me brother called Tristan who could just sort of fill the gaps. But I suppose what's quite important here is he lost the platform, and in some ways he became more relevant than ever. And that's a whole separate conversation about how do you deal with that sort of stuff. But do you think that by denying people like him a platform, does that make a certain subsection of the population go, well, he must have something relevant to say?
I mean, in the very beginning, yes, like as soon as it happens, but then he becomes irrelevant very quickly. Remember that I don't know how to pronounce his name. Milo what do you know how to pronounce his last name?
Milo Yiannopoulos. Yeah, very similar characters. Really good point, actually.
No one remembers who he is. Everyone was talking about him all the time, but no one remembers him. Richard Spencer or whatever. People will forget about these characters. Like, it will be in the beginning, in the 2 months after they're deplatformed, then people will be like, oh, they have something to say. But then, as we all know, like, media cycles are very short and people don't have a big memory. And like, I'd rather people like this be deplatformed.
But I suppose as well, going back to this, for somebody like Piers Morgan, who's trying to build a show on TalkTV, there are massive incentives, therefore, to invite somebody like Andrew Tate on, because nobody else is going to give the guy a platform. You know, that interview, which is up on that YouTube channel, that's got a million views in a very short period of time. So unless it's coordinated across all of the media, it's an interesting question. How would you do that? So for instance, when it was Milo Yiannopoulos, the British media was BBC, Sky, ITV, Channel 4. Now you have TalkTV, you have GB News. It seems to me there's a kind of fragmentation going on. We're actually saying that the deplatform thing, it was a really effective strategy regarding Milo. I don't think it was the wrong thing to do. I think it was the right thing to do. But I wonder, as the media landscape evolves, as you get these new channels, often very right-wing, often very populist, maybe that's just going to be less effective.